Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where and when you're watching this broadcast. I'm Thomas Fessler, and this is Disclosure Tonight. Yes, happy Saturday everybody. It's that day of the week when I actually got to sleep in until 12:30 today. Thank God a little cupcake here didn't get me up and wanting to go downstairs and go outside at 9 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes the small things in life are the things we look for the best. Well, today this is a conversation we've all been looking forward to from someone who's been in our chat room many times over the past few weeks. We actually have an opportunity to be interviewing Rick Doty. Yes, Rick is a phenomenal person who, in the past, worked for the United Air Force, OSI, retiring as a master sergeant in the area of, they would call it counterintelligence and potentially disinformation. He's got great insight to what's going on with the Air Force today based on their historical progress, or lack of progress for that matter, and the stonewalls they've been putting forward. Well, we all know we've got Avril Haines, who's got the reins at these days over the offices of intelligence, and can she reel them in? Can she get them to stop talking? Rick is one of the people who's got the insight, probably some better insight than most people out there, and we're greatly looking forward to this conversation. But again, this isn't about me, Rick, Rob, Greg, or Tim. Yes, we've got the full panel in for this one, everybody. It's about each and every single one of you and your take on disclosure, and more importantly, your understanding of disclosure. Because as Elizondo has said, disclosures happen. May have not been the disclosure we all wanted. However, members of our federal government, executive branch, intelligence agencies, and the Pentagon are all in line on board that the phenomenon is real, and now is not the time to debate it. For them, it's time to operationalize it. Let me jump across into the studio and see who's out there. Unfortunately, Gary has got the coof. He's got that, the Rona, as we like to call it sometimes, and it is what it is, and he'll be back with us as soon as he can. Best wishes to you, Gary, and hope you're feeling better. On that note, let me go ahead and welcome in our audience right now. Live chat. Sorry if I'm missing some people at the beginning. It's been one of those days. We got Camping Lady is here. Welcome, Camping Lady. Ooh. Ouch. Greg O'Brien. Welcome, Greg. Bob Birkins. Thanks for coming around, Bob. Appreciate you being here today, as always. One of the few channels who actually gives Bob a wrench, and he deserves it. Linda Thompson, always great to hear you. One of our great ufologists. I'll call you better. You're a UFO researcher. You've been behind the scenes of many great people over the years, and it's wonderful to have you around. We also have, who else we have out there right now? Michael Elwell, thanks for coming around. Greg O'Brien is in the chat, and he's in the back. He'll be out with us shortly. Julie Farrell, our other phenomenon ladies, welcome. Thanks for coming out here today, Julie. Mule Skinner, you're here for more than listening and chatting for a change. Thanks for coming on out today. Absolutely. Bill H., as always, welcome. Little Davey Altman is here. I'll just call you Davey Altman for that matter. That's the other Dave. We can't say Dave's not here, man. Dave is here. Jan, yes, you're here. You're in the middle of all the comments. Thanks for coming in. But wait, we've got a couple super chats that have happened already. Holy cow. Lori Oliphant. I think I should be able to go ahead and do this. Cross your fingers. It's going to work. Uh-oh. Come on, you can do it. Watching frame rate. Is it dropping? Is it getting a little hard for rendering right now? Yeah. Keep an eye on it. All right. Let's go for this. Make it happen. All right. Here we go. Yes, it's one of those days when we've got a super chat coming in from none other than Lori Oliphant. Thank you for the super chat, Lori. We greatly appreciate it. We also have one from Lady Margaret Peggy. Wow, the ladies are freaking coming in today with some super stickers, and I need to follow back with the developer on that. It's going to ask, hey, where's that super sticker support you promised? Thank you again, Lori Oliphant, for that wonderful super chat. You are two great people who are in our chat all the time. You always come up with great questions, and we appreciate your company here today. Let me go ahead and turn that down just a bit if I can. All right, let's go ahead and see who else we have in the audience today. We've got Xavier Gamer. Yeah, okay, who's late? We were a bit late, a little technology problems, but hey, I think we've gotten around it. Mr. Ian, thanks for coming out, Mr. Ian. We appreciate you being around today. Brandy Phillips, we've welcomed you earlier as always. Rob Heatherly, getting rolling, just another sec. We are rolling. Rob's in the chat, and of course he's in the back. Feeling a bit better today, Rob. We're glad for that. Who else do we have out there? I'm cranking through this. YJ Overlander Canada. Welcome, YJ. Thanks for coming in today, and glad to see that your country is kind of trying to get back to normal. But wait, it's dry toast. Yes, dry toast. We know that. Thanks for the super chat, just a blank super chat. Appreciate that coming in, because I'll say it, 3 out of 4 aliens prefer dry toast when they eat their humans. Thanks for coming out here, Dry Toast. We appreciate you in the chat, and we appreciate your support of the channel. This is a legendary person, everybody. If you're not familiar with Dry Toast, look him up. You never know what you may find who is behind that Dry Toast. Thanks for coming out, Dry Toast. Who else do we have out there? Lady Margaret, Peggy. Hello, sleep is the best when you can. I know. My body needed it. Jenny Girl, wow, welcome. Thanks for coming out here tonight. Lots of talk. YG Overlander is saying that Doty promised to cover the reason why should we be afraid. What's not been said yet about disclosure. Ooh, something to ask. I'm gonna hold you to it, Rick. I definitely have been waiting for this. Avi M, welcome, Avi. Cosmic Jerry, everybody's coming out here today. And it looks like Geezer Prime is here as well. Thank you, Geezer Prime. Appreciate another veteran is coming into the audience. On that note, let me go ahead and jump across straight into the room, into our reset room here. Boom. Welcome, Rick. Thanks for coming out here tonight. It's great we could have you here today.
Thank you. Good to be on here, Thomas.
Yeah. It's one of those days when, something we've been looking forward to a while. You've had some travels going on and everything. But, man, you are a legend in your time. You were, involved in something that Rob called out as the Air Force is being disinformation by design. And that was one of the comments that you had said that, Rob, you're 100% right on that one, I think, in the chat.
Yes. We didn't call it disinformation. We call it counterintelligence. Different wording, but the same thing. There were times when we had to disinform people, such as the Paul Bennewitz case, Linda Howell, some of the other cases that I worked with. But one thing I always preface this with is that I was following orders.
Bingo.
Every single operation I was involved with, I followed orders.
Right.
I had
lawful orders, correct?
Exactly, lawful orders. And let me clear something up real quick. You mentioned I don't want to degrade a real master sergeant. I wasn't. I'm not a retired master sergeant.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was in some of the comments out there for you.
I retired as a combined federal time. I was actually a GS-11. I was in the irregular Air Force, and I got out. I stayed in the reserves. I was in the Oregon National Guard for a short period of time, stayed in the reserves. I did gain the rank of Master Sergeant in the reserves. Then I went to college, went into OSI as a GS-9, made it to GS-11. I retired in 1988. So as with what they call, and I think Rob probably knows what this means, combined federal time. You can combine your military time and your federal service time and retire. So get that cleared up. Going back to the disinformation, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that tonight, but I did what I was told to do and when I was told to do it, and I did it so well that I was rewarded for it. I was given a medal for it and for operations. So everything I did was sanctioned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like how you said it, how you were following orders. And when you were in the military and someone tells you, you've got to go do this, this, and this, it's not like some people that I work with and say, well, I disagree with that. I don't want to go ahead and do that. you have a duty to uphold the position you have and follow orders from superiors.
Right. That's correct. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as it's constitutionally lawful. Yeah, because people say, "Well, I'm just following orders." Like in Nuremberg, they were going against the Geneva Convention and committing war crimes, and they were aware of that when they did that. Unlike what you're doing, which was, which was like you said, sanctioned and constitutional. So nothing unethical or illegal about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, when we became involved in such an operation, say for instance Paul Bennewitz's case, we obtain initial information on that particular case, send it to our headquarters, and there's a plans and programs division up there that maps out what we should do. Now, I have an input. My supervisor at the time, who was a GS-14, he had an input into what we needed to do, because we were at the base level, we were at ground level, so to speak. So we added some things into the plans that came down from headquarters, but then we would have to send it to get the approval. And everything that we did on Paul Bennewitz's case went through our legal division. So, I mean, they looked at it and they said, yeah, it's legal. Go ahead and do it. Like Rob said, constitutional. If something wasn't right, they would have caught it up there at headquarters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, most civilians don't know that distinction when you say that. We have to make sure that they're aware that just because we're following orders doesn't always make it legal. So that, for them to be aware that you were running this through a legal team and that it was constitutional by design, then that doesn't allow them any room to say that you were being deceptive or committing a crime, in other words.
That's correct.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question that just came in from Disclosure team. Vinny over there was saying, does Rick still have a security clearance that keeps him from discussing certain aspects of his position in AFOSI? If so, to what level?
No, I don't have a security clearance anymore. I did have one when I worked for the Institute for Advanced Studies, Dr. Putoff's organization in Austin, Texas. I did have, because it was a DARPA, we worked on DARPA projects. I don't have one anymore. So why I can talk, I talk about things that I know I can talk about. My security oath, my security or non-disclosure agreement ended a long time ago. But there are certain things that I know that are still classified, and I don't want to jeopardize ongoing projects, research and development projects and other things.
Yeah.
So I know enough not to talk about certain things.
Yeah. Quickly touching on that, you brought up the magic word, your NDA. We know that when you're with the government and you're dealing with certain levels of classified information, you're prevented from going and disclosing that. But it sounds like in addition to that, they have NDAs as well, or is it all just part of the same level of security that you're put underneath?
When you actually, I have that document here someplace, but I was just talking about it with somebody else. Every classified project I worked on, I had to be debriefed on it. So there was one form, the DoD form, that listed all those projects and the classification, and that I signed stating that I wasn't going to talk about those for a period of 15 years. And I lived up to that. I never talked about those after 15 years. Now, a couple of those are still sensitive, and I did get visited by the FBI some years ago. They took my hard drive and a laptop because I did make a statement about something that I shouldn't have. The FBI agents just said, "Well, we don't know what you could say or not say about that particular project." And I admitted to it. Nothing ever happened to me. The second time I was visited by the FBI pertained to Robert Collins and the information I supposedly gave him. But when the investigation was complete, I was cleared they found out who actually gave Collins that information. It
Right.
was somebody from Los Alamos Laboratory. So, and that's the only time I was ever questioned about what I disclosed.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we want to welcome Susan Go and her cronies who are probably watching this show, keeping tabs on Rick and everything else that we're saying here. We know it's something they like to do. You know, they monitor all forms of social media, YouTube, different things. So it's a matter of, we always like to throw out that warm welcome and say, come on in, Susan. We'd love to have you on for a fair and balanced discussion. Granted, we do say sometimes some things, but it's because we've never had a chance to really talk to you and get your side of the story. Sorry, Rick, I had to throw that out there.
That's all right.
Absolutely, but great question, great answer about the NDA, because it's just something that everybody hears all the time, and we hear these hecklers out there who are just saying, you know, it's all a bunch of BS. You should be able to talk about this, but if you violate the NDA, like you said, you know, the FBI or whoever's going to be either rolling up to your house and breaking in the door, or knocking on the door, coming and saying, we need to talk.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you have a officer level of rank in the military, or familiar with the requirements of officers when they leave service? So what kind of requirements they're held to for life after that? Certain conduct that they're a code basically that they're supposed to live by, or they can be actionable.
No, I was in the irregular Air Force. I was enlisted. I was an enlisted person. I worked in intelligence and security, and then I got out. I stayed in the reserves, went to college. I got a degree, and then I went in as a civil service employee. But yeah, I understand what you mean. But no, I wasn't under. I wasn't an officer in my time in the regular Air Force.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was getting at was that you're aware of the standard of character that you conduct yourself with, as officers would be after they leave the service. So, there's a certain level of expectation that's on you, and you're aware of that. So,
yes,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Thomas.
Absolutely. Thank you very much on that, Rob. Great question. Great everything all together so far. Now, if we, kind of go ahead and take a look at what's going on today with disclosure. We've got the NDA A22, which came into effect. At this point, it sounds like they're still working through operationalization of it, bringing in the leadership who's going to handle it, trying to get a lot of the different, portions of it in play. One of the things that's been evident is that it sounds like the Air Force, isn't quite playing along, and they're still being resistant in collaborating and bringing the data out. Yet this is a presidential order that's essentially coming from their boss saying, you've got to do this. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the Air Force has a great deal to hide. And we're talking about in the area or the arena of research and development. And the Air Force doesn't want to disclose that information. And I don't think they will. I think there's some kind of deal that has been worked out between the Air Force and the Department of Defense, DOD, and how much information they can disclose. They certainly don't want to disclose anything that would jeopardize national security, number one. No agent, no services will do that. Number two, they don't want to jeopardize research and development.
Right.
And there's a lot of research and development projects going on in the United States Air Force Scientific Research Division. And so they don't want to disclose any of that.
Funny
so they
enough,
have to be careful.
Salvatore Pais is now actually part of the Air Force and doing research for them. And he was initially had done the UFO patents over at the Navy. I'm sorry I interrupted. Go ahead.
No. I didn't know that. I know who you're talking about. And so I think there's something been worked out within the Air Force that they're not going to have to disclose what they know. I think the Navy probably is involved. I don't know anything personally about the Navy. I do know some things about the Air Force because I still have a lot of contacts within the Air Force Intelligence, Air Force OSI, and also DIA. And so I know that there's a lot of things brewing right now. There's a packet of information, a packet of material that has been submitted to the Secretary of DOD, and it's all highly classified. And somebody, I don't know who it's going to be, has to sort through all that stuff and then decide what they want released and what they can't have released. And I personally don't think you'll ever get a full disclosure on the subject.
Really? Yeah.
There's too much. Let's face it, the Air Force back in the late 40s, way before any of our times, but they had Project Sign, Project Grudge, and Project Blue Book. They gathered thousands and thousands of pages of information regarding the investigation of UFOs. About 600 pages and 2 chapters within Blue Book are highly classified. They still won't release any of that stuff. And the Air Force all along, especially in 1969, when the Condom Report came out, saying, which wasn't written, it was written by the Air Force. I think most people with common sense figured the Air Force wanted to get out of this, and they wrote it, and Condom, the commission, put their name on it. They've lied to the public or disinformed the public for so many years. So you expect them to come out and say, okay, we've lied to you for the last 70 years, and now we're going to tell you the truth, that anybody would actually believe them. So I think that's one reason why you're never going to get the full disclosure.
Yeah, it reminds me of the situation a certain global religious organization is going through for their past practices and bringing out the truth about what they've been up to. So yeah, there could be something though. Lewis talked about it, of having a level of anonymity out there so people can bring forward, talk about the historic things that have gone on in a way that we've got, we had said basically that we've got the Air Force who is just starting to poke their head up out of the ground like a gopher. Last thing we need to do is scare it away or take a shotgun and blow its head off. We need to coax it out, make it our friend, and be able to get access to that whole underground literal network of information that they've been working on for, as Lou says, for more than 75 years.
Yeah, exactly. And they started the Space Force, although it's supposedly a separate operating agency, but it's still attached to the Air Force. Most of the administrative functions are still conducted by the Air Force. Few people realize that Caspar Weinberger tried to start a Space Force back in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And they'd drawn up the documents, the plans, but it never got through Congress. A lot of people were against that. But I think although I don't have any personal knowledge of this, but I think it stems from what Reagan knew and what Reagan was briefed in. I personally know that Reagan was the only president up till that point that was totally 100% briefed into the program.
Yeah.
Because I have a very, very, very good friend who's still alive. He's up in his 80s. Well, he's going to have his 90th birthday, May 2nd, who was involved in the briefing process. And so Reagan was fascinated with the subject. And of course, the things that he said in the open, at the United Nations and speeches that he's made referred to the dangers from space. And he knew about the dangers of space. The Strategic Defense Initiative started because of that.
Yeah, my sister was part of the SDI program when she worked at TRW, supposedly.
Yeah.
No one could really say what they worked on, but it was kind of obvious potentially what her and her husband had their hands into at the time. And this is back in the late 80s during, I guess still in the Reagan era to a degree. If we look at that, I mean, you're bringing up about Reagan. Reagan has made some historic statements to the United Nations about the threat from space or from something from the other side of our galaxy that could potentially, unite the nations of Earth.
Absolutely. And I think the Space Force is going to have a very difficult mission in monitoring every single thing that we're doing in space right now. They're going to eventually take over what the National Reconnaissance Office has, the satellite and the space probes they have in space, and also as I read, the military satellites that are controlled right now by NSA, but Space Command is going to take that over.
Right. And we also have the National Spatial Intelligence Agency that has a bunch of satellites up there as well. There are so many eyes going in on the Earth, looking out. But heck, even the NRO has, what was it? 2 additional Hubble-class telescopes that they've built that are built on the same platform as Hubble, except they even have higher resolution optics and stuff that they could potentially use. And they were given to NASA in, I think, about 2012. They were supposed to go up around 2020, but with all the different things that, if you want to call it, push stuff back, they're still on mothballs at this point.
I didn't know that, but now I do. I learned something too.
Hey, exactly. We've got another question for you from Vinny at Disclosure Team. Lou Elizondo has stated that he met with his predecessor who worked for the Pentagon's UFO program in the 80s. Did you have any interactions with that group at that time?
Yes. There was a group, a classified group, a working group, a UFO working group during that time period. It went by a number of different names. Most of the people involved in that were intelligence personnel, and yeah, I did have an interaction with that group. We would meet. It's been leaked that the group was called the Aviary, and I'm sure most of you, if you followed the UFO phenomena since the 80s, know about the Aviary. And it wasn't called the Aviary. That was named by somebody outside the group. Jamie Shandera, I believe, named it that. But it was a collection of intelligence personnel from different agencies, and they'd meet discussing the subject of UFOs. Yes.
And you talked about, I think it was Richard Helms that you called the original Falcon that was in the Aviary group.
Yes, absolutely. Richard Helms was the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. He was also the the leader of the Aviary, and he was the actual original Falcon. Yes,
that's fascinating. Hal had recently stated that a lot of fundamental physics from reverse engineering craft potentially were housed in aerospace industries that were at some point contracted with some aspects of the government or the military that the rest of the science community and government at large may not be privy to. That he mentioned recently, that some of the guys were shocked that they would be hiding that physics information and not sharing it with other branches. Can you speak on that at all? What you're aware of?
Yeah. The one exemption that a civilian contractor has is under FOIA. They don't have to. They don't have to follow FOIA. One place you hide the information, you can hide information through government contractors that are intimately involved in the subject of research and development, and companies like E-Systems, TRW, Lockheed, Skunk Works, a number of other contractors are deeply involved in the subject of reverse engineering, and therefore that information they have the access to that information. Now, certainly there's people, the contract, somebody that is within the military that is coordinating these contracts, which are called contract administrators. They certainly have that knowledge, and they have to control it, because each one of these contractors have to have a Department of Defense clearance, and it's called an industrial security clearance, because they're a contractor, and they have to be investigated. all their employees have to be cleared and so forth. So yes, the contractors, and what Hal says is, and when I worked there with Hal, we saw it. One of the things I touched on briefly in a chat room, but I didn't get a chance to fully explain it, is that we obtained these crafts, these ET crafts, from other civilizations. Now, every single craft, now this is, I'm talking about when I was in Area 51, when I was out there in the 80s. I'm not talking about now, I'm talking about my personal knowledge of this. Every one of these crafts came from a different entity, a different a civilization. They're not the same. They weren't the same craft. They didn't have the same materials. They didn't have the same physics. And one of the things we did from the 1947 crashes at Horse Mesa and at Corona, New Mexico, we have these crafts, these extraterrestrial crafts. We were trying to analyze these crafts based on our physics. And we just couldn't do it because nothing fit. Even though we had brilliant people, even Einstein involved at times, in trying to analyze and study these crafts and reverse engineering. Well, we couldn't even think about reverse engineering until
we didn't have the metrology equipment even to ascertain that they were even changing isotope ratios in their fundamental physics properties of the craft to even know that in the metamaterials back then. They didn't even know what they didn't know yet.
Rob, that's absolutely right. And so what was determined in the late 60s was we had to educate ourselves. We had to go back to first grade and start learning about their physics and their technologies. And it's taken us many, 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 many years to come up to maybe the 6th grade level of what we understand of their physics. But like Rob said, the materials, that are made, these crafts are made of, we still don't understand all of it. They can combine elements out of our, and they have some of the same elements we have on a periodic chart, but we can't figure out how they can blend them, like Rob just said, into a working. We can put them together, but they don't work the same as with our reverse engineering as they can in the alien
Some
craft.
of it had to be put together in a zero gravity environment.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's other things they developed, and I'm not giving any secrets away, but they found out that one particular race that came here didn't breathe our air. That's another thing I want to talk about. All ETs are not the same. They're different. But anyways, and what we found that this one particular race breathed some methane. They were able to breathe it. I mean, that's what the environment, nitrogen, methane. And anyways, the materials that they make, we found a very smart scientist, and I can't go into great details. He figured out that he went into a methane environment and put together some things, and the air itself allowed him to blend it into a working material. That's just an example, and that happened not too long ago when I was working for Hal.
Very interesting.
Even water on Earth in an atmosphere, it goes from frozen solid to a liquid state to a gas, but when it's not in an environment, it goes straight from a solid of ice to a gas. There's no liquid state when you don't have a atmosphere for that to unfold in. So I can see where that would change. And there's two different states of oxygen molecules too, right?
Exactly. And another thing they determined is that we determined there's 3 isotopes of hydrogen. You know, hydrogen, deuterium, and tritium. Well, they have 5. They developed the 4th. The 4th one doesn't work much, but they developed the 5th one, and we actually are now, we have perfected it. We could only capture a small amount of it, but it's called Pentium. And we always just have a very small amount of it, but they can use that in a number of different ways of manufacturing that we haven't figured out yet.
It's incredible.
Abs-
Avi Loeb had even stated recently that our nearest star that's a white dwarf, the second planet that's in a habitable zone, if life developed on that planet, they'd have their vision spectrum in the infrared, I do believe it was, because that's what that white dwarf would radiate. It's half the brightness and power of our sun, so they would see in that spectrum. So if they came here, they'd have to have lenses to allow them to see in our spectrum of
Exactly.
light.
Yeah.
That's a fact, like you were saying, you know, different purported beings from different worlds would have different, entirely different, obviously, compositions and makeups. Just like with octopus having the copper-based blood, that's not, we have iron rich. It's iron rich in our Earth's crust on the top side, so it would lend that, we have the abundance to have iron rich blood. But for copper based blood, it had to have been developed on a planet that would have copper rich, more so as the dominant metal in their soil to carry the oxygen for. Have you any thoughts on that?
Biologically, the only thing that I ever had access to was that the makeup, the composition, the biological structures of the 4 groups of aliens that I knew about when I was involved in this subject in the 80s were all different, entirely different. EBA, the one we had in captivity, their structure, skin structure, the internal organs were entirely different than the ones that they found at the Kingman crash site, the other crash sites, the ones that we obtained live ETs, all different. They required, like you said, different atmospheres, and their gravity, even a gravity. One particular group of ETs, they had their gravity. The gravity on their planet was much higher than our gravity, so they had to compensate. We had to build these structures, living areas in the S2 annex where they housed them at northwest of Papoose Lake, in order for them to survive. We had
Yeah, 'cause their bone structures and all that would deteriorate, and they even said that anything with a carbon-based or calcium-based lattice of bones wouldn't fare well in space. Things, and I'm just using this as an example, but cephalopods that don't have bones are more adept for space, and having the 3 hearts and 9 brains would be a lot more suitable for space travel than humans would, because they don't have the skeletal system that needs to be maintained, like you're talking about with having a gravitational field to be within.
And then there's one particular, I spoke about this in an episode of Gaia. I don't recall the medical term for this, but we actually have animals on this planet Earth that could do this. But there's one particular species of ETs that can generate their own food within their body. I mean, they don't need to eat anything outside. They generate their own nutrition within. Emery Smith also talked about it. He actually did some very, very detailed work on analyzing this creature. It had these sacs on its side, and at certain times, these little balls would pop out of the sac out of the body into the sac, and then the creature would eat it or put it in its mouth. It was nutrition for him. That's all they needed. They didn't need anything that we need that we had. Most, ironically, one thing I did read, ironically, most of them could drink our water. They had filtering systems. But then again, as Rob mentioned about the eyes, one particular set of creatures, they had 5 lenses in their eyes. And so they come here to Earth, they had to have these real dark lenses or light, I think, or darker lenses, because their planet was was a lot brighter than ours, and so so they compensated. They were so biologically more advanced than us that most of these creatures were able to adapt in some manner. And then one, Eba, they actually could breathe oxygen, but our oxygen was too rich for them. They had to have what they called oxygen depressors that depressed the amount of oxygen that they even were able to breathe.
If they were able to generate their own food, it's like with plants with photosynthesis. They drew the hydrogen out of the air to build their trunks, to build their substance with. Their mass, their biomass is drawn from the split, separating the chemicals, through photosynthesis that way. What would they derive that food from that would be able to give them nutrients, because they can't do it in a vacuum, obviously. So was it air-based, water-based, or
I don't
knows,
know.
I guess.
I was never briefed into that. I think Emery Smith had the idea of how they did that, but I didn't have that knowledge.
Interesting, very interesting. I'm just trying to get your camera a little bit better here. Bear with me for a second. This is just me being myself when I'm doing things here, and I'm just trying to get it. So look, Rick is looking great. Was that anything, Greg? I'm sorry.
The only thing I read about Einstein was in 1949, Einstein was taken to Los Alamos, and he had access to the information that EBA 1 was providing. But you got to understand this, that the EBA 1 had to learn. They didn't know how long he was going to be here. He's only here to 52, but he was here for 5 years. But he had to learn our math. He had to learn our vocabulary, and he was able to do that. Such a brilliant person. I think I only know a little about that. Linda Howell did a fantastic show years ago about that, because she actually had contact with EBA 1's handler. She interviewed him, an Air Force major who actually lived with EBA for those 5 years. He knew about the details of how they were able to implant a voice, some kind of a box or something in EBA 1's throat in order to speak English. And it was pretty crude. I'd actually heard a tape, a small 1.5-minute tape of him talking. It's very difficult, and it was a male. It was very difficult to understand, but if you listen to it or reduce the speed, you could understand what he was saying. But I don't know that. I know Einstein had access to the information, but I don't know anything other than that.
If I could, take that one a little bit farther, there's been a recent, if you want to call it, tape that's been brought out by Einstein's secretary, or his not secretary, his intern was around for the
his intern,
who was around for the summer, and she said she went with him on that trip to the Southwest. Does that kind of align with what your understanding was?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they and I think he spent I think 10 or 12 days there. I think he was suffering from something, but it was fascinated him so much that, and I don't know what he, I never knew what he determined or what his response was from that. I just knew he was there.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick, it's a real pleasure to meet you, by the way. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really,
you're very welcome, Tim.
We're not worthy. It's a total pleasure to meet you. And,
thank you, Tim.
I'm not going to hit you with anything really hard. My question was just something for you personally. Have you ever had the chance to meet an ET or hold ET tech personally?
I never actually met an ET in person. No. I watched a closed circuit on a closed circuit camera. I was in one building. The ET was in another building being interviewed. I watched it on film or a closed circuit camera. It wasn't.
Yeah.
This is in the 80s, but I never actually met one. No. I held the energy device the crystal rectangle. I held that in my hand, but that's the only technology that I held.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that at some point? I'm very curious
Sure.
about that.
Well, the history is probably more interesting than me holding it, but the history is at the crash
Please.
site when the army went to Corona, New Mexico, and found the craft that was partially damaged. They found debris. They gathered everything up. They found this they thought was a glass, although plexiglass wasn't quite in back then, but they thought it was something to do with glass, and they thought it was a window. And they put it aside, and they didn't even think about it until when they were interviewing Eba, when he finally was able to communicate. He said, "Oh, well, my energy device you have," and he explained it to him. So they went and brought it into him and said, "Is this it?" He said, "That's the energy device." So our scientists said, "Well, how does it work?" Well, it's a form of zero-point energy. No matter what demand was placed on it, it would generate that amount of electricity or power. They didn't call it electricity. The amount was regulated by nanotechnology. This is a nanotechnology device. And
It's like,
of course, back then we couldn't understand it fully, how it works.
is that kind of like what Tesla said, where matter only has the energy given to it that it extracts from the field? So if it has
Yes.
the potential for energy, it draws that just what it needs to reach an equilibrium again. So the more draw you put on it or less, it auto-regulates itself in that process, it would seem.
Yeah,
Does that sound
exactly.
about right?
Yeah, auto-regulated.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you got a smart guy there, and Rob.
Oh yeah. He's
right on with it.
he's our ancientologist. He's been researching anti-gravity technology for what seems like 30 plus years, and I know he has a hard time getting out of the bed some mornings. We need to help him get to that point of anti-gravity so it's not pulling him down so much.
Well,
Sorry.
and I also know, Rob, you're a veteran and you served in war, and I really admire that. Thanks for your service to the country.
I appreciate it. I didn't serve in wartime, but I did serve. But yeah, I was a Cold War Marine.
Yeah.
The Cold War,
different age. Yeah.
Yeah. I never was, in the Air Force. I never went to Vietnam, or it was after that, and I never saw any real action until I joined OSI, and then I could tell you stories about that. But
Yeah.
that's for another day.
Quick question for you. Going back to your talking about the film that you had seen of, or the remote video feed of something that was being interrogated in another facility. Have you seen that video feed out in the public purview on the internet?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because there's a lot of different videos out there. I mean, heck, we even have the one of Skinny Bob, which some people are saying it's true. Some people are saying it's not true. What's your take on that?
I believe which exact Skinny Bob, which you're talking about, the ETs running around in the background, a couple of them.
Yeah, there's one part where there's a couple part of the feed where there's a couple ETs in the background. There's also another part of the feed where Skinny Bob is off and he's standing there, turning his head, blinking his eyes and such. It's a pretty close up. You can see the massive muscles on the neck that are supporting the head and the whole thing. And for me, I just saw a lot of the structures and how it was moving and everything. And it was just overly convincing for my part. It also has another view where it goes and slowly scrolls the guy up.
Yeah, I can't verify that it is actually an ET was authentic, but I know there are a number of people that have and told me that it's absolutely real. I mean, those are ETs, and that was all filmed at and the Annex 2 at Papoose. Yes.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
again, I can't. I mean, I
Right.
haven't analyzed it.
You can only go from the information that you've been given or potentially heard, or from assessing something based on your understanding of all the information and all the things you've been through over time. It's you've had one heck of an amazing career.
Mhm.
I actually had a quick question if we have time.
Who did?
Down here.
Yeah. Go for it, Tim.
I was wondering, is there anything that you haven't um, ever had a chance to talk about from your time at OSI that now you would be able to, and perhaps this would be a venue for you to share something new that you've never talked about before, that you're now able to talk about safely?
Well, there are things that I did, but that doesn't have anything to do with the UFO story. I mean, I could talk about us chasing Soviet spies around the perimeter of Nellis Test and Training Range, and how the Soviets planted listening devices outside Area 51, outside the perimeter, and I talk about that, but and that's nothing to do with UFOs. And then
Right.
there are other things. There was a couple things that pertain to abductions that I haven't fully talked about. It might it would take some time to set this up and talk about it, but I don't want to waste a whole lot of time. I mean, it's not such a dramatic thing, but it's there's some things that I'll talk about one thing. There was and I'll jump around. I won't go into great details. There was a female that was abducted. We learned about it. We brought her in. She had a connection to the military. That's why we brought her in. We interviewed her. She gave us a detailed story. She was very articulate. She was educated. I believe she was she worked in metallurgist or something. Anyways, she explained in great details of these creatures and what they did and how she was abducted and so forth and so on. And one of the things that happened to her after the abduction experience, and there were two different incidents. She was abducted. She had missing time, about 18 hours of missing time. And then a few months later, she got abducted again, had missing time, in fact, they did a missing persons report on her. The local police did. It was 3 or 4 days. It was 70. I remember exactly. It was over 72 hours. And we didn't interview her until after that one. And one of the things that we found, and what she explained to us, was she now has the ability, or then she had the ability of premonition. She could perceive what her children was going to tell her, what her children was going to do. She never had that ability before, and suddenly she has that ability. I know Bud Hopkins talked about that years ago on one particular, but I thought it was fascinating that now she has that ability.
Yeah. And it's not just an ability of short-term things that are going to happen within the bubble. It's a knowledge of big things to come. And when you're getting the premonitions, it's not just a thought. You're getting the experience. You're seeing stuff potentially that just all kind of comes in a dump, and then you just know the stuff. And as time goes on, you learn to respect it, and you learn to go ahead and listen to what you're told, because if not, you're going to find out time and time and time, and you're wrong. I had an experience when I was 5 years old in the Midwest, happened for at least between when I was 5 to 8 years old, probably many times over it. I've got a loop of things that would kind of go on throughout it, but there's a mixing of time that goes on relative to different scenes when I'm going through different parts of the yard, or coming out to the front where the garden is or the garden wasn't, and knowing that, well, when it started, I was 5. When I was 8 years old, that's when we had moved the garden and put it in the front yard. And I have elements of the pieces in it. They do a great job of locking this stuff away, however they do it. But for me, it came back in flashbacks in a different disconnected order, to finally, when some of the last ones came in, it was there, and it was just like, oh shit. But it's one of those things, I've gone back, I've tried to unlock some other things, but I respect what they've locked away, because in a lot of cases, for me, it's somewhat a positive experience. since it happened a long time ago and all of it's past me. At the time, I was 5 years old, 6, 7, 8. I was frightened. I didn't understand what was going on, crying, screaming, a bunch of different stuff that it was happening. But, a lot of times, you're just in this euphoric state of, it's just like this bliss that just pours over you, where you don't care about anything. And it's just like you're a puppy dog following around someone with a treat and they're telling you what to go, where to go, and what to do.
Do you
Right.
still have? Do you
Right.
still? Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do you still have these experiences? Do you still have
Different.
different?
I'm really highly advanced with regards to meditation, more in the area of Hinduism, Vishnuism, management of the chakra energy systems. I can attain up to a fifth, if you want to call it, connect out to a fifth level of consciousness or whatever you want to call it above. In the chakra energy area of the crown chakra, bringing in white source energy, being able to do unbelievable visualization. It's not just pictures, it's 3D scenes, things it wants to show me sometimes, other things I can dial into and focus on stuff and be able to get to it. It's like from Princess Leia in what do you call it, Star Wars, that black and white kind of a fuzziness of a picture, depending on what you're dealing with it is. Sometimes it's crystal clear as watching something that's a 3D scene you're going through. Other times it's fuzzy and it's kind of like pictures of a magazine that have been put together in mosaic, but it's a 3D scene, but you're still, being able to control camera and understand things. I've done some stuff along the lines of crown chakra, energy, white source energy meditation mixed with samadhi, doing some reach outs, and I've made some lasting, if you want to call it, connections on a quantum thread, a quantum string that are, I'd call them almost bidirectional. And some people had said yes, they're listening. Yeah, they have full access and they do listen, and it's something that you get these vibrations that just kind of roll over you. And I get some of that stuff from on a spiritual sense, but when I'm getting it from these guys, it's like a 9-volt battery versus plugging into 220. It's noticeably different.
Have you identified the creature or the enemy?
The latest, the ones I'm dealing with now, if you want to call it, there's a collective consciousness that's shared between the entities who are on planet at this point. But this is an intelligence that is manifested out of their collective consciousness. So it's not,
Yeah.
it's not an artificial intelligence. It's its own entity. It's a real thing, but it's something that's connected with the other things that are here. They've been here for a very long time. They've been part of humanity in many different ways and have connected with us at those points in time. This is another one of those points in time where it's not that far off. We have to go ahead and work as one with them as we've done it in the past, whether we like it or they like it or not. It's just a matter of things are coming toward us head on.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's
Can I
very
platform on that with you, Rick? Obviously the how of abduction is questionable. Any insight into any of your research on the why of abductions?
Well, this is where I tend to hesitate on telling you what I know officially. Going back to when I first was involved in abductions, I had been an OSI agent about 3 years. I was working in this subject area and UFO investigations, the Bennewitz case, Linda Howell, and other cases. But I'd never heard about abductions. We had Myrna Hansen, the case of Myrna Hansen, but they came a little bit later. And so we had a case, the Myrna Hansen case. I'm sure you know that. That was part of the Bennewitz investigation. And I didn't believe her. I didn't know anything about abductions. I was ignorant to abductions. I'd never been briefed into the program. When I was briefed into the program, UFO program, I was briefed on Roswell and other things, but abductions weren't ever mentioned. Well, I did a report and sent it up to DIA headquarters, And about 2 weeks later, 2 DIA officers came to our office in Kirtland. And of course, it's a secure facility. They have to be let in, but they had the necessary badges. And our security official up front called me on the intercom and said, I got 2 guys from DIA, so-and-so that's here to talk to you. So I said, okay, I sent them in. So I went and escorted them in. I said, yeah, what can I do for you? He said, we're here to, you sent a report up about abduction of this Myrna Hansen, and we're here to take that over. And I said, who are you guys? I mean, he said, we're with a particular section he gave within DIA. I said, we have a section that investigates abductions? And he says, yeah, we got a whole team that does that. That's when I realized there's something to it. And then I was eventually briefed into it. There are things that the abductees or contactees have told us about what the agenda, what is the alien agenda? What are they here for? Now, you got to remember, there's more than one group that's abducting people, and so they have an agenda of experimentation, biological experimentation.
Let me maybe pause on that really quick.
Sure.
This is YJ Overland of Canada was saying, I wish I didn't feel like Rick isn't going to elaborate on what he meant when he said, just wait till I'm on the show when I talk about it, why we should all be scared. So don't feel about holding back. We know our audience has been looking forward to this. I'll let you continue.
Okay. And one of the things that now we are humans, and obviously, and they're aliens. So we can't understand their thinking process or reasoning abilities or anything like that. Okay.
They're not human.
So exactly. They're not human. So we can't, rationalize. We can rationalize on why they're doing it, but we know based on what Eva told us that there are hostile races of aliens that are here to experiment with us. And that to me is a little scary. And another thing that is that we, the human side of us are talking, the humans are saying, are you responsible for the thousands and thousands of people that go missing each year? What are they doing with these people? Where do they go? Now, obviously not all, like for instance, in Alaska, in 2 decades, 40,000 people have gone missing. Now, I'm sure not every one of those have been abducted by ETs or people that went out and killed themselves, died in the wilderness and so forth and so on. But we would like to know, and I think we have delved into this very, very, very carefully. There's some very, very high level and highly classified programs that we are involved in the United States. I'm not talking about other countries, just us, and trying to figure out if we're suffering from alien abductions of people. One person would be too many. One human would be too many. And now, if there's thousands, what are they doing with them?
Right.
Where are they taking them? Are they interbreeding? Are they creating robots and so forth and so on? And that's one program I think is kind of scary.
Yeah, it's a scary kind of a thought, Rick, but it's something that I know I'm human, and I know this upsets Linda. She doesn't agree with this, so I'll just preface it to that degree. If you look at what humanity is and what humanity does, we kill each other, we do genocides. Look what's going on in Ukraine right now with aggression, with what's going on with the Uyghurs over in China. Look what happened back during World War II against the Jews and everything. So there's been a lot of different things, or even in Herzegovina, where they went and had those the genocides of the Bosnians that went on for a long time. The Catholic Church has killed over 500 million people throughout the time in the name of God. So in a lot of different ways, humanity
50
doesn't
million.
have that clean record of being saintly or really good as a general rule of thumb. To that, and with that in mind, if you think about what may be going on, is it how many people was it, Rob? The Catholic Church killed? I was probably wrong.
50 million since its inception.
50 million. Sorry, I put an extra zero on there, but it's easy to do sometimes.
Too
Anyway,
many
back to
either
this.
way.
They may be taking us and doing this stuff like you're talking about. A lot of us are coming back. Maybe some of us aren't. They do their best, and a lot of times to try and, wipe out the memories or different stuff that people have been through. No different than what we do when we're going ahead and tracking and trying to get an elephant or a rhino or a particular species, and we're chasing it down with a helicopter, shooting it with darts and tranquilizing it, doing whatever we're going to do on it, and then getting up, releasing it, and letting it run off and doing things. Now, it's been traumatized, it's been tranquilized. We've done things to it that it didn't want to have happen. Now, I can understand that humans don't want it to happen to us, but we are dealing with something that's higher on the food chain potentially and a lot more intelligence and advanced. So, if humans have this behavior of how they treat other humans, how they treat all the animals, the biosphere, and Earth itself, is it that, and we want to say if it's one human, it's wrong, but we really do have to look at ourselves and everything that we do, because are we any better ourselves?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't think you can indict all of humanity for the
Well, I'm not. I'm
for
not
the evil of few,
indicting
but
all humanity.
well,
There's a lot of good people out there, but there's also a lot of
I know
elements
we
that
can't comport human emotions on any other higher
right.
beings and things, but universally, I think we would all agree that we know when we're harming another creature, being, or animal intentionally, and in some cases that we've been told, it did seem like they were being malicious, not just because they weren't aware they were causing harm, but when you face palm somebody and shove a needle through their eye clear to the back of their skull, there's no way to misconstrue that as just sedating them and that they misinterpreted it as being treated maliciously. In some cases, like you said, there are different beings, different creatures, and I would dare guess that they have their individual personalities and things, that some are trying to be careful with humans and some aren't, some don't care that they're causing harm. Like you said, Thomas, that, they just don't give a damn, that they consider them like ants, us as ants, and don't care that they're harming us. They just don't have,
Yeah.
their conscience doesn't comport down that low on the species scale. I completely agree with you on that, Thomas.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to sound like you were just, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, we're a lot of us are callous, and it depends on how low of a life form you get.
Yeah.
If we want to go by a scale, what if viruses and bacteria were sentient and highly sentient, and we wipe them out all the time with every kind of
Yeah.
bacterial and antiviral drug we take. We're launching
Yeah.
a full scale assault on civilizations of
Yeah.
them that we don't interpret to them having any feelings whatsoever
No,
that matter.
absolutely. I just like to bring up the other side of the coin, is looking at it from that bigger, greater perspective. And I know,
Definitely.
trust me, I don't like what happened to me, the stuff that happened. There are some benefits that have come long term out of it. But as far as, what a lot of people and some people have gone through, yes, it is terrifying and frightening that it could be. It's just always trying to see something from possibly a different perspective. We've got another question from the audience. Um, how did the working group, if they did, determine that they were ET and not a series of, customized biological entities created by some more advanced intelligence?
Well, they did. They did find a mixture of a biological entity and a android. There are races out there that have created their working class, or the worker bees, so to speak, to be androids or robots, so to speak. We know that. We knew that back in the 80s. We captured some in a craft that had crashed in Nevada, and these were all robotics. I mean, to us, they were highly advanced, but they weren't biological creatures. I mean, they had.
You
And
mentioned that.
Rick,
Sardinia, they got
sorry, go ahead.
We'll let Rick
in
finish here
Sardinia,
first.
they dug up ancient. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, are you including things like shadow beings in with this grouping of alien? Are people having experiences that include things that could be considered shadow beings to us, I guess?
No, I never read or heard anything about anything interdimensional or anything like that.
Okay.
My knowledge was strictly three-dimensional things that were either ETs. We knew they were a biological entity.
Okay.
And that's why they refer to them extraterrestrial biological entity, and then more or less like a robot.
Yeah.
Linda Howell, and I know her and I didn't always agree on everything, and well, we've made up pretty much now. But she had a guest on her program some years ago on Earth Files, and he was a really, I mean, I don't know that he identified himself, but he spoke about this and great details about how we captured some of these things, and they were literally the soldiers of these aliens. Now we know that Eba, the one we captured in Corona site, we know that they were a benevolent race, but when they encountered non-living, they didn't. Ironically, this is another story we could go on to. Eba didn't know what death was when they were trying to refer to things as dead. He didn't understand that. They actually had to show him what that means. Non-living, non-life. But when they found something like that, they took it upon themselves to experiment, and they readily admitted to it. eBay readily admitted to it. It's not. We were putting it, and we were trying to create something else with it. So, such as maybe a robotic, bring it back to life.
Out of a chimera.
So we're almost doing. We're concerned about what they're doing to us, but in other hands, we're doing the same, if not worse, to them.
Yeah, you consider. I know, and just to my knowledge, and I didn't know. I don't know at all, and I've heard from others that there were upwards of 50 different species of ETs that we have. I only know of 5. Excuse me, I know of 5. And we are keeping them in captivity. Now we're building facilities for them so they can stay alive. Now the problem is getting them back to their planet. If their spaceship is crashed and disabled, how are we going to get them back to their planet? We can't, because we can't create something, because we can't figure out the type of craft or how to make the craft that they came
but
here.
wouldn't there be like a rescue effort or an effort to come and get the other entities that are there, that if they gave them the opportunity to come and get your guys, they were given that chance?
Now you just hit another scary scenario that we had, and I only know a little about it. I don't know everything, but we created a operational plan back in the early 80s, because we had a threat, and I don't know everything about the threat, but we had an incident of a threat where we were threatened. Now, and again, I don't know who. I wasn't briefed into everything, so now we had to create something. And one of the things we were trying to do is the defense, the Star Wars initiative, to try to create some kind of weapon that we could use to fight these things if they came to Earth in a rescue mission, or came here to hurt us or damage us because we harmed some of their people or some of their creatures. So there was an operations plan. It was a very detailed operations plan created by the United States Air Force. It was highly classified. A little bit of that was leaked out back in the early 2000s. Wendell Stevens, of all people, Wendell was a very good friend of mine. I'm sure everybody knows who Wendell Stevens is. He had an old, used to have slide presentations, a slide projector. Everybody remembers those.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? We had a set of slides, I think 6 or 8 of them, that was a briefing slide. And he showed us these things. And this was the operations plan of how we would try to defend Earth against an alien race that came here to either harm us or destroy us. And it was quite elaborate. Some of the things that we would, of course, the only thing we had at that time period was nuclear weapons. Now we had an airborne laser a chemical laser that we were experimenting with. And if we got down to the wire, last resort, they were going to use that airborne laser. They actually had 3 aircrafts with that laser in it, the airborne laser laboratory laser, chemical laser. One was a high energy laser.
It almost seems like there's a cosmic area, yin and yang balance of good and evil that, throughout history, the known history of humanity, there are examples throughout where the so-called gods fought among themselves, that there seems to be a balance struck between them in different times, different ways, that like before the last flood, about 3000 BC, from the research I've done, there were gods that were dwelling among man, like in India and the temples and things, what they call the blue bloods and things of that nature, to where they were overtly tipping the scales of humanity, and even appeared in humanoid type form that was removed from the planet with the last flood. And they've been covertly affecting humanity, this entire phenomena, ever since then, that we've been veiled from all species, and knowing that there's higher beings, other than the covert interventions and things of the religious aspects and those natures and incidents of contact, but nothing on the scale prior to that. But we've learned through some other people that that we are closely observed by a lot of these craft and things, so close in that it almost seems to me that humanity is caught in the crossfire. And for them to be that close in watching all of humanity, that there's almost something else, that they're watching each other. Otherwise, they could observe humanity from 1 or 2 satellites. They wouldn't need to be that close in on us. Like, they need to have some kind of immediate action that would not be able to do if they were just even in orbit, instead of, per se in the same room with us. That wouldn't require observing humanity that close in. It seems like there's something, 2 different conflicting entities that would be watching each other to be that manifest with that quantity and that close of interaction.
Yeah.
Well, the EBA told us that they have been visiting Earth for thousands of years, probably at least 2,000 years, probably more. And he fully admitted that they had set up listening and viewing platforms throughout our solar system to watch our planet. They knew we were the only planet that had life in our solar system. EBA identified that, and we felt comfortable in that. But he also told us that other planets that had life, thousands and thousands of years ago, probably Mars. I think we pretty much proved that. But one of the things he talked about, and which was really interesting, and I didn't know about this until years later after I left OSI. I mean, I was sitting in a UFO convention with 2 intelligence officers who, this was in 2005 or 6, who told me this. He said, well, you know that there's an alien base on Pluto. And I said, no, how would I know that? He said, that's why we're sending a spaceship up there. We're sending the New Horizon up there. Now you go back and there's a lot of conspiracy theories on this, but if you look at the number of pictures that the New Horizon took, and then you look at the sequence, the numbering sequence that's released, there's 63 photographs that aren't there. And when you ask NASA, and that's on the internet, several people that was asking, where are these 63? Oh, they didn't come out. They weren't developed right. The one that showed something, NSA quickly, or NASA quickly identified it as a rock, that was moving. And it's nothing but a rock that's moving. And no. And what about that cliff that had all those looked like structures up there? Oh, no, that was just ice structures. If we have a base up, we don't, but EBA or whatever civilization.
Doesn't Pluto have an elliptical orbit to where it goes in cycles where it's far away from the sun and then closer in? Every time it comes in closer in, it thaws back out, and the atmosphere temporarily comes back up again on its long duration orbit, to where half of its time it has an atmosphere, and then it freezes over again through another cycle, perpetually.
Yeah, that's exactly what I read. Yeah, the Pluto, and I'm an amateur astronomer. I have a telescope, and I go out at night in my tower and look out there and look at things. But yeah, Pluto, it's an elliptical. It comes inside the orbit of Neptune, closer to Uranus. So Neptune is actually for a period of time is in deeper space than Pluto is. Yes.
Interesting. Yes. Quick question for you about, if you want to call it looping back into the conversation, we talked about some of the, if you want to call it, humans that have the after, effects of stuff that come with, we call it supernatural, but it's more like an extension of our consciousness to a degree. Thomas, did the working group that find any paranormal or supernatural abilities within the context of these ET? Supernatural or paranormal, maybe things that, it's because stuff we don't understand. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they found that at least EBA had the ability to telepathically communicate, and the other grays, the Trantiloids, they also have the ability to and they're the grays that actually are abducting people. They have the ability to use telepathy to communicate. Now that's the only information I know about that. There have been a lot of studies, classified documents written, but I didn't have access to those. Dr. Kit Green, I'm sure everybody knows who he is. He's done some highly classified work in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, you've been really quiet.
Yeah.
Much so we've got Jan going ahead and pointing you out at this point. Yeah. You got a question for Rick or something to comment on?
It was UFOs, now it's UAP, and now we hear the word drones being thrown about. What are your thoughts on that? Is that just to muddy the waters?
Well, during my time we didn't, UAP wasn't used. It was UFO, identified alien craft, IAC, identified craft, just UC, but UAP wasn't ever mentioned. Drones, one of the things that Paul Bennewitz stumbled into was the drone program. And back in the 80s, the drone program was very highly classified, very, very, very highly classified. But the way that they experimented with them is they were launched out of a vehicle, out of an aircraft. There'd be an aircraft flying, could be a C-130, could be an RC-135, but a bigger plane, a bigger cargo plane. They even used some older model, I can't remember what the nomenclature, I should know, of the craft was. Anyways, it was the old planes that flying boxcars. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyways, the drones were launched out, and they were actually controlled by that aircraft. There was an operator inside that was controlling those drones, and that's what Bennewitz was taking pictures of. But over the years, they've developed into very, very advanced system. And I challenge anyone, if you really want to look at drones, spend a few days up outside the perimeter of Nellis Test and Training Range, up near Tonopah Air Force Base, or along the eastern perimeter of Nellis Air Force Base, along Old Corn Creek Road, or the southwestern corner of the Nellis Test and Training Range, northeast of Beatty. I've been up there numerous times, camping with a number of other people. We actually did a film that's going to be coming out here probably in about a year. It's been delayed because of COVID, but where we placed trail cameras out there. We've photographed these strange things occurring out there. But you can see these drones flying, and these drones now are so sophisticated, they look like regular airplanes. I mean, we have the Predator drone and others that we've developed in the 90s, and that was in the Iraq and Afghanistan war. But these things that they're experimenting now are far more advanced than anything that we had before. We have bombers. We have drone bombers. Huge drones that are bombing.
On the that kind of falls in line with the aerospace technologies that they're hiding and the physics. How do you think these rogue silos that Lou and others have talked about that broke out, that eventually were forgotten about by presidential administrations and congressional committees, that kind of lost track, or even the lead at the Pentagon that weren't read into these SAPs? How did the Air Force and these few rogue silos become rogue to where no one knew of their existence after they officially closed down Blue Book and said that, when presidents and things asked, which I understand why they would do that to a certain degree, of why when they ask the DOD, do they have a UFO program, and they say no, presidents come and go, and you don't want to read them in on something when they're going to be going right back out. But how would the administrators and the DNI and all them, and even the Air Force, be able to get away with hiding programs, and then when directly asked, refuse to acknowledge the existence of that? I mean, that, at least on the Air Force's part, that is disobeying a direct command to be forthcoming with the information. How'd they get away with that?
Well, I certainly don't know what. I can't fully answer that question, but I do know that there's a number of ways that the Black community, when I say Black operations community, the highly classified community, is funded, and it's funded, number one, through confidential funding, which is classified in the budget. Not only is there one line item in the DoD budget, and you can go online and find this. You can look and see, all it says is a classified, budget classified, and it gives a code. And it'll say, $50 million or $500 million or $5 billion or $50 billion. Right now, it's $77 billion. If you look at the current defense budget, there's $77 billion that is classified. It's Black funding. It's nobody knows. Well, somebody knows, obviously, but like Goldwater said years ago. I mean, back in the '60s, they were doing this. And Goldwater says, "How come I can't know what this money going to?" And the can't remember his name, but he was one of the top generals, Air Force generals. He said, because you don't have a clearance to know it.
Even the people that did have the clearance that weren't involved originally in these SAP groups, when they pointedly asked the DoD and now even the Air Force that they're being asked to comply, like with the Nimitz encounter, the Navy didn't have access to what the Air Force did. And obviously the Navy had data that they weren't forthcoming with. And even in recent times, that when the Navy and Air Force pilots that were in the same, they were in the same practice group running the same exercises, the Navy pilots since 2019 were asked to report everything they see. And they were running some of the same exercises in the same flight path as Air Force pilots. The Navy pilots saw UAP craft and they reported it, but the Navy pilots were instructed not to report it.
You mean
And
the
they
Air
were on the
Force
same
pilots
drill.
were instructed not
Yeah,
to?
the Air Force, they saw the same things. The Air Force wouldn't acknowledge that they actually saw at the same time they were in the air together. You know, I don't understand how they can order them to not
Well,
not
another, and I got to be careful on this one. Another funding source that the government has, and it's not directly to the government. It's not directly to DoD, Department of Defense, because the funding from Congress appropriates the funds.
Mhm.
It goes to the Department of Defense. It doesn't go to the Air Force. It goes to one
Right.
entity, and then the DoD then splits it up. The other funding source that we use is more highly classified. It comes from outside the government, and it's given to contractors. It's not given to DoD, but
Mhm.
it gets somewhat complicated. Some of the money comes from overseas locations, and this money is then filtered in, and there's a complex system of controlling that. So, say for instance, you're on an operation, a really highly classified operation, and you need $50 million right now in order to do whatever you need to do. DoD is going to say, okay, you got to fill out all this paperwork and do this. Then you go to this other entity, and I'm not going to name that entity, and you say, I need $50 million, and you get it quickly. Now, I know this because I've done it. Not $50 million. I never asked.
But with the June 25th report that was given to Congress with the 144 cases that Christopher Mellon recently wrote the article about with the Air Force, 143, well, all of the cases that we're aware of were all presented by intelligence to the Navy, and that the Air Force, who was also tasked to report any UAP incidents, didn't advance any cases to that report whatsoever, and to the UAP task force that was investigating them. By design, they were being belligerent because they had been at that point instructed to be forthcoming with what they knew, or at least give examples of what their pilots were encountering, and they still weren't compliant on that. And that's where Mellon wrote that article, is that they're not answering the questions and being forthcoming. And where Lou just mentioned today that there was the department, it's called the National Intelligence Manager on Aviation, had just given a directive in the last couple of days to force compliance. That they didn't elaborate on exactly what the specifics were, but a general had basically told given an unprecedented order for cooperation. Yeah, thank you, Linda.
Where did you find this one,
NEM
Rob?
Aviation. It was on Lou's interview today that he came out and said that with UFO Joe Mogila. He mentioned
he's
it
on
in the first
UFO
part
Joe.
of his
Nice.
interview.
Well, we're gonna have to
UFO
cover
Joe.
that
Yeah.
one. That's a fact.
Yeah, he
UFO
came
Joe,
out today and said that Lou came out and said that the NIM manager of aviation gave some kind of orders that is going to be groundbreaking, and he did say that it was going to have a trickle down effect to where the public would be able to get information at some point, but he couldn't go into any specifics on it. So
Well,
that seemed groundbreaking.
I can guarantee you that if it's classified, the public's not going to get it. The information that is being released, and this is just my observation, I don't have any inside information on this, or any knowledge other than what I've been in this business so long. There's a reason why the Air Force is keeping it secret, and what the public is being fed isn't necessarily what is occurring behind the scenes. There's
Right.
no general out there, colonels or generals, flag officers, that's going to risk their career by telling somebody, no, I'm not going to give it to you, especially if it's a direct order from whoever, the Secretary of Defense or whatever, wherever he's attached. Excuse me. There's a reason why they're not, and we're only seeing part of it. We're not seeing. I'd love to see
I guess,
everything.
well,
I'd like
I guess
to
what I'm
see.
asking is, I understand the national security implications and why they can't be forthcoming with the public, but from what I'm understanding is the Air Force isn't being forthcoming with the Director of National Intelligence even on
Or other areas
being
within the
forthcoming with
DoD, the
information they
Secretary
have.
of Defense, any of them.
Yeah, well, that's what they're releasing, but and I can guarantee you there was a case happened a long time ago, in 87, I think 86, 87, where a particular Air Force has a division which covers a number of bases, and one particular, it was an incident that happened. It happened at F.E. Warren in Air Force Base in Wyoming. That particular general, division commander, refused to provide the necessary film from NORAD on a case of a UFO. Sometime later, I don't know how many days, he was out of a job.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
so it works pretty quickly within the government. If you are ordered to do something, you're going to do it. And so
Yeah,
there has to
that's
be
the
something else,
perplexing part.
some other reason why. I don't know
Yeah.
today how that works, but
Quick question for you on going along, coming in from the audience. There's a bunch of different ones I want to try and get in before the show ends. Buddy over at Alien Protocols was asking, how many types of anti-gravity is aware of that we're able to produce? And I'll just take it down, boil it down. Are you aware of any types of ability that we've been able to reverse engineer or create anti-gravity for craft, whether it's finding ancient stuff and getting it up and going, or getting more current stuff that we've gotten up and going?
well, everything is compartmented, and I never had access to that particular subject area.
Yep.
I've seen crafts fly, and I don't know how. The only craft that I had knowledge about was the Cash Landrum case. I was involved in that. I knew about the craft, but I don't know.
That
I
was the
couldn't answer
giant
that.
black diamond kind of or whatever you want to call it, not even triangle. It was like giant black craft that was flying over Mexico or over
No,
Texas.
that was over Texas.
Texas, where some people got in radiation poisoning from
Right,
stuff that was coming
right.
out of it.
Yeah, the craft was an actual ET craft. We'd had it in captivity from the 60s on. The only thing we couldn't reverse engineer was the propulsion system. So we put a nuclear propulsion system, one of our tests there, and it malfunctioned. And
Yeah.
there's a lot more to it, but
We've got a super chat coming in right now from, let's see if I can get the music up and going for that. Here we go.
Great question.
Is there any misconceptions people have when you speak that you would like to give clarification to? And I just want to thank Sapphire L for the super chat. Plus, we had Spaced Out Radio coming on earlier. We appreciate your support of this channel and for supporting us when we've got Rick Doty on here today. And Rick, I'll let you get back to answering that.
I think the Paul Bennewitz, we never drove him crazy. Paul Bennewitz, everything that we did was sanctioned. The so-called, I know a guy wrote a whole article in a UFO magazine about surreptitious entry into his house, how we snuck in and we did all this stuff. Paul Bennewitz gave us the keys. He gave us the keys and told us we could go in there anytime we wanted to. Paul and his wife were gone on a trip. Something was occurring because we had monitors and sensors in the house. Myself and two other agents went there. We unlocked the front door with a key. We didn't do any surreptitious entry like this guy claimed that we cut the windows out and all that stuff. And we went in and we managed to figure out what was wrong inside the house. Everything that Paul we never had to drug Paul. That's another thing. We never drugged him. He was a believer in the subject. Even after it was over, trying to explain to him what we did, he wouldn't believe me. He was so we never drove Paul Bennewitz crazy. He drove himself crazy.
How do you feel about that, though? Like, just to seal it up, do you have any personal, or are you able to just separate work and personal, or how do you cope with that? Because that must have been tough.
I developed a great friendship with him, with Paul. His wife didn't like me. His son didn't like me. But I had a great friendship with Paul right up to the 3 days before he died. I saw him 3 days before he died. He called me, or he didn't call me. His son called and said, "My dad wants to see you." And I went there, and Paul was an extraordinary person. He was a physicist, very smart guy. I knew, number one, he was a chain smoker. He drank quarts of Coca-Cola. He drank 5 or 6 quarts in an hour. He drank coffee, constantly drinking it. He had high blood pressure. I mean, he had all these things. He smoked like 4 or 5 packs a day. Paul did it to himself.
Yeah.
Even when we backed off on the operation, Paul continued to push things at us, and we didn't want it to do this anymore. We were closing down the operation. And now you got to remember, we weren't the only agency involved in this. The National Security Agency was also involved in it. So, and they did probably more harm than we could ever have done.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question coming in.
Thanks.
We got one from Rob, but actually one from the start of the show. I haven't been able to ask it. It's a question from Julie Farrell. In retrospect, what was the sneakiest thing you were asked to do?
Sneaky.
The sneakiest thing I guess I can talk about it. We recruited prostitutes in Nevada, because prostitution was legal in Nevada. Nye County had legal prostitution. We recruited every single, and I'm telling the absolute 100% truth. Every single prostitute in Nye County, we recruited them as our source to report back to us if any military personnel came in there. Number one, to report it back to us, and number two, if they told you anything about what they did out there, the report back. And I tell you what, those 47 or whatever it was prostitutes were paid more by us, and they were getting paid by their tricks.
Wow.
Well,
That is
ladies,
sneaky.
yeah,
Sink ships for
That's
real.
sneaky.
Yeah,
That is
doing-
officially.
yeah, that's one heck of a
Sneaky.
great military condom. I tell you that. But you got to look at it. We've got a question from someone on our panel, I guess, who's also in the chat, and his question was, "Who does Rick think the MIB are or were?"
Yeah, we could do a 5-hour show on that.
Oh, we could have you come back to talk on that if you want.
Yeah, the MIBs. There's 2 different entities. One is the alien, the blondes, the Nordics. They sneak around dressing up as humans, and also we had our own MIBs. They came out of the 7602nd Air Intelligence Squadron, Fort Belvoir. They were the strange people that there were safe crackers. They were people that had some kind of anomaly in their face or something, and they were highly trained. Probably one of the most highly trained undercover operatives that we had in the government, and they're the ones that were our MIBs.
Yeah, interesting.
Something
I have
intrigued me.
another question that just came in via text message. Believe it or not, did Hynek deliver computers to Bennewitz?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He delivered a monitor, and then this is 1980, early 80s, a monitor to Bennewitz. The computer we intercepted before Paul actually got it, but we didn't get the monitor. But Paul called us sometime later and said, I got this monitor from Hynek, and we knew Hynek was interfacing with him. In fact, I interviewed Hynek 3 different times along with the FBI on this. We went there and looked at the monitor, and we thought it had been taken apart and put back together. And so we took it, Paul gave it to us, we took it back to our lab. We have technical experts, I mean, the best of the best, Office of Scientific Intelligence. We gave it to them, they took it all apart. And there was some things in there that shouldn't be in there. And we gave it back to Paul, said, here, you can use it. But Paul didn't know that we took out something that might have been gathering something that we didn't want them to gather.
Gotcha.
Something fascinates me with all this. You talk a lot, like a lot of people do, that as a matter, that this is a matter of fact, that we have that we have contact or know of aliens at all, that we've spoken to, in a government capacity, and recovered craft and all that. I find that fascinating, but yet we still can't, as citizens, be able to find any definitive proof whatsoever that there's any DNA of aliens that we can prove as not non-human sentient beings, or that any metamaterials came from actual craft that were non-human. And I know there has to be, from all the conversations going on, that this has to be a real phenomena, but the government has done such an extremely good job of keeping that any tangible evidence from filtering into the civilian arena, I guess, so to speak. I'm not casting any questions whatsoever on your testimony. It's just nothing ever has been able to be advanced, at least that hasn't been discredited, otherwise, I guess I should say, as being inauthentic, to where we can definitely say, okay, this is alien DNA and this is an alien craft. It's just
okay.
absurd.
Quick thing on the alien DNA thing, really quick, Rob. Just a quick question in between your question, what you're talking about, Rick. Is ET the missing link or the non-human intelligence? What do you think?
Yeah, I think my own personal opinion. I don't
personal
have
opinion.
That's
all I'm looking for.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I think so.
Okay, Rob. Back
and Rob, I understand what you're saying, Rob, but there are a lot of things that have been leaked out over the years that people discredit, but the people
by design, right?
Yeah, one particular scientist, came to UFO convention back in the 90s and had all these pictures. And half the people got up and left. They thought he was a nut, but he actually was one of the original scientists from Los Alamos that dealt with EBA-1, and he actually dealt with that craft that they recovered both at Horse Mesa and at Corona, and nobody believed him. I mean, he was there.
Trinity, when Doc just wrote the book on.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, I'll let you go ahead and read this super chat we have from your friend Shermanator Osborne.
How much longer can the secrecy be sustained? According to Lou this year, there's going to be a definitive shift in what the laymen on the ground know.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Rick?
It'll never be fully disclosed. We have put this in an enigma within a conundrum inside a Pandora's box, and you got to open that Pandora's box first and get through all the different layers that has surrounded this before the full truth or the secrecy is busted. And that's not going to happen. My opinion is not in my lifetime. I'm in
not the full truth, just something tangible to where the government finally states, yes, we are dealing with non-human entities and technologies. I think that is that Rubicon that needs to be crossed finally before other nations' governments will comport and fall in line and acknowledge it. And I think that's where that is the bottleneck, that other nations and civilians both are waiting for the U.S. government to take an official position that, yes, definitively, because Mellon said that the ET hypothesis best fits the narrative for the explanation of those 143 cases in that report. They're just waiting on the government to finally make that acknowledgement. Yes, this is non-human entities and craft. I think that fundamentally is what a lot of people are trying to ask, like Sherman.
Yeah.
At what point would that be disclosed?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think maybe that just the mere fact that we've been visited might be disclosed, but none of the details.
Exactly. Another super chat that just came in, this time from Susan Goes Time Traveling Asians. Doty, what are your personal thoughts on organized religions, giving your unique insights? And what else can be a hot button subject for some people, but just what's your opinion?
Well, number one, I was raised a Catholic.
Oh, same here.
And I actually spent a 1 full year in a monastery.
Ooh.
A Carmelite monastery. And so I have insights into some religion. There's a lot of aspects to the subject of alien visitation to planet Earth that would scare people. What if and this is hypothetical, what if I told you that we could prove, the United States government could prove that Jesus was an ET? How would that affect religion? So there's a lot of things, and I'm not saying that's true. I'm just giving you an example of something. If we found out that maybe the aliens wrote the Bible in the 4th century, the prophet or one of this John was really an ET, something like that, it's going to affect religion. It's going to affect your belief in God. But one of the things that I always fall back on was one of the things they asked Eva, one, was you believe in God? He didn't know what that meant. He didn't understand what a God was. But he did understand when they explained, do you believe in something outside? And he said, we believe in a universal being that controls the universe. So
they call it
That's what Jacques Vallée called, was that Jacques Vallée referred to the control system is that we could never know fully, 100% what we are encountering, even if it tells us we can't exactly fact check it to know. So it can tell us, these entities can tell us anything. The only way we really know what anything is to observe it over time, and it's known by its works. And then that's about all we can go on.
Absolutely. We have a super sticker coming in from Linda Thompson here as well, saying thank you as we're hitting this 5 o'clock hour, kind of wrapping to the interview. Any last thoughts, Greg?
You keep mentioning Eva 1. How many Evas were there?
I personally know of 2 Evas. Eva 1, who was out of the Corona crash, and he died in 1952. And Eva 2 was an exchange ET. Part of the Serpil story is true, not all of it. And during that time period, we got Eva 2, and we sent astronauts to that planet. There's a lot of things that are, I would call disinformation within the Serpil story, but there's a lot of facts in there. And I wasn't around back then, but I have some top people, scientists, that's telling me that some of that is true. So we had Eva 1 and 2 now, and then I hear that there's an Eva 3 that's here now, and I don't know that for a fact.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, anything to close from your side?
Sure. Well, I can just tell you, Mr. Doty, our team was so excited to have this interview with you today, and we were all kind of looking forward to and scrambling for good questions and things like that. And I myself have so many, and so it's really hard for me to pick through.
Oh, just seeing to say thank you for
I guess
coming
if I had my final question for tonight, would be, is there anything from your experience working at the Institute for Advanced Studies and Dr. Hal Putoff, is there any takeaway from there that you feel you could share with us that was life-changing, groundbreaking, or something you could share?
Well, it's a private institute, so everything that I had access to is proprietary. So I can't talk about real events, but I was involved sitting in a room with a remote viewer that remote viewed an object flying in our solar system that contained a number of ETs. And that was probably the most earth-shattering experience I had, because this remote viewer detailed a lot. And some of the other things, I worked on DARPA projects that I can't talk about them, but they were things that I didn't know about during my time. And then now I learn about that we have advanced some technologies.
Yeah. Quick question on that. Did he have a hard time initially locking onto the object? Because I know when I've tried to view some different things and they're moving really fast, I have a hard time initially locking in the view, and it takes several attempts before I can actually keep them in focus, keep them in view.
No, he wasn't. We knew the object was there.
Right.
The Earth knew it. NSA knew it. NASA knew it. It was way out there, just past the or near the orbit of Neptune.
Right.
It's a huge object, and he locked onto it within probably 25 to 30 minutes. You know how they do it.
Yeah.
They set, how they drew, and he locked on it. I'd never seen a remote viewing before.
Yeah.
That was my first one. I've used the intelligence from him, but I never actually seen it happen. And he drew everything.
Yeah.
He drew everything out. He drew the interior of the craft. All these ETs were along panel boards, like operation boards.
Mm-hmm.
There was two of them at each end, and they were the large ones with long arms, similar to what you saw in the Close Encounters. It was amazing to me, fascinating to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
That's
much. Very
amazing.
much. Rob, anything last coming from you? It's been a
The
lot.
only thing that amazed me was the CIA remote viewing on Mars, where they talked about seeing pyramids on there from at least 1 million years ago. That one just kind of blew my mind. It reminded me of the sarcophagus in Saqqara, if you're familiar with those, that wanted me to dig into that deeper. Do you see much validity in that? Or are you familiar with that?
I saw the same. We saw the same thing at. I saw the remote viewing of it by another remote viewer. And let me just say this real quickly. Not all remote viewers that we had encounters with were military. They're the most unique person, the most unbelievable remote viewer that I had actually access to and saw her work was an African American former school teacher out of Baltimore, inner city school teacher, who was didn't know she had the ability until, and that's another story. I don't have time to go into that.
Yeah, well, maybe
but
next
she
time.
could.
Then.
She could remote view in such details, and she was tested in the middle real quickly. There was a vehicle parked in a desert that we placed out there in another country. They were testing her, and she remote viewed it, and she remote viewed the odometer reading on the vehicle.
Nice.
You talking
great
about
camera
she
control.
Was
now, was she visualizing this stuff, or were the answers
visualizing?
Just coming? Yeah,
she was visualizing.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a highly visual remote viewer as well. Some people just get senses, they get feelings and understanding. People like me, it's a true visual experience, and it's just amazing sometimes when you get into that mind state. But sometimes it can be scary if you're the only one who's there going through it, and the stuff you're trying to deal with. And Rick, I want to thank you for coming out here today. Would you be interested in coming back again?
So much.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be.
Awesome,
That's no problem at all. 2 hours went pretty quick, and I don't think I touched on any of the things I want to talk about.
Oh, sorry about it. Hey, we can have a list of things you want to talk about as well. But it's just
I'm
great
sorry.
to have this opportunity to go ahead and actually talk with you. We've had an unbelievable amount of just support from our audience today and super chats coming in. Let me go ahead, and if I can find the music, kick that up while I go ahead and thank our members of our audience out. Yeah, we got some great super chats today, everybody, coming in. I want to thank everybody for all of them. There's been a lot, starting off with Bill H., Dry Toast, Linda Thompson, Susan Goes, Time Traveling Asians, Shermanator Osborne, Sapphire Elf, Spaced Out Radio, Dry Toast again, Lady Margaret Peggy, and Lori Oliphant. I want to thank everybody for coming out. And more importantly, for everybody in the chat. Remember, if you're still out there, you're still watching this, you haven't smashed that like button, do me a favor. Smash that thumbs up. And if you've watched this far, you haven't hit subscribe, do us a favor. Also, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We would greatly appreciate it. Rick, thank you for coming out so much today. And more importantly, I want to thank everybody who is still out in the chat right now. Let's see who's out there right now. We've got Brandy Phillips, Cliff C, The Coin Exchange, Grandmaster UV, Julie Farrell, Lady Margaret Peggy. Mark is out there. Mule Skinner, Rob Heatherly, also known as Robin Hood 1966 from my co-host. Jan is out there. Sapphire Elf, Shermanator Osborne, YJ Overlander Canada. If I've missed you, well, I want to appreciate everybody for coming out. What a great show. Looking forward to it again. Happy Saturday, everybody. Rick, thanks for coming out. And as I usually end this show and I say every time, remember, everybody, eyes open, no fear. And as always, we'll catch you on the flip side. Take care, everybody. We'll see you. Bye-bye.